Y'all love to talk film, discuss, to critique.
What is going on, everybody? Welcome back to Blood Splatter Chatter Live, doing another movie review tonight. We got a good one. We're talking Brandon Cronenberg's Possessor from 2020, and we've got another great guest to join us as well from Pop Culture Philosophers, the man, the myth, the legend. It's Rockin Robbie Billups.
Station, man. Pop, pop. Boom. You know what I'm saying, man?
Station, brother. Thank you so much for doing this, man. It's always a pleasure to have you on, and it was I thought long and hard. I'm like, what do I want to get Robbie on to do? And I know that you would never seen, correct me if I'm wrong, you've never seen any of the 3 films so far that Brandon Cronenberg has done, correct?
That's right. Even though I'm a huge fan of his father's work, I have never seen a Brandon Cronenberg film. That's why when at some point you would send me another list and you're like, what if we, and I was like, nah, man, I'm committed to this because I've been wanting to check out his films because I love his father's work so much. And obviously there's got to be some kind of influence. And I think there is. I think there's definitely a strong influence from father to son.
Oh, yeah. Well, actually, this wasn't part of the rundown, but it was something I'm thinking with. Well, I'll tell people real quick how we do it over here on Blood Splatter Chatter. We're going to spend a few minutes doing some background information on the film, and then we're going to walk through the plot and start spoiling things in a brief fashion. And then after that, we'll give our full thoughts and review, and we'll rate the film. But kind of up front, what I wanted to ask you, without getting into too much details of what we're going to discuss later, like, you do see similarities, like do you see a kind of continuation or thematic similarities from his father, David Cronenberg's films?
Absolutely. I think it would be nigh impossible for an artist of the caliber of David Cronenberg to not influence his son in some form or fashion. You got to think this dude grew up around him, right? He grew up around his work. And when he was old enough, he probably saw some of his work and he probably thought, man, what the fuck is wrong with my dad? You know what I'm saying?
Right.
But what's up, Two Gun? But I see it. There's a body horror element right now. Cronenberg is synonymous with body horror. If you look up body horror, David Cronenberg's picture is right next to him, right?
Right.
In the dictionary, of course. Oxford's, not Webster's, because they're backwards. But also it's the idea of some of the themes. Like he's exploring cerebral themes through genre fiction, right? And that's something that like other filmmakers do. Like filmmakers deal with themes in genre fiction. John Carpenter, George Romero, right? Wes Craven. But like David Cronenberg gets really, really cerebral with it, right? And technology, science fiction, how that meshes and blends in with horror. That's something that I picked up 100% in this film.
Hell yeah. I think when I first saw this movie, I was a little bit less familiar with David Cronenberg as a whole, and then going back and watching it now after I've kind of been in Cronenberg mode this month because we're also doing Shivers next week on this channel.
That's
and
right.
Then The Fly on Dylan's channel in a couple weeks from now. So I've kind of been like schooling myself on the Cronenbergism. But after watching it again, I noticed a lot, even more similarities just with the technology and the body horror combined together that you mentioned, and just the kind of the desire to shock the audience, kind of grab your attention with extreme violence or extreme, just like things you'll see on the screen.
It's bold, right? You know, and that's something that Cronenberg is. And even in his earliest films like Rabbit or Shivers, right? It's still bold for its time. So it's a bold movie that's provocative, like intentionally provocative. And the blending of, like you were talking about, technology and identity. Like that's something that like how technology will affect us as a society and our individual identities. That is something that's very much thematically relevant in this film and in other David Cronenberg films like Videodrome, for instance.
Yeah. Yeah, if Brandon Cronenberg would have dropped the word flesh once, maybe he did and I missed it. But if he could have just dropped that little nugget in, maybe it's too on the nose. But okay, just a little background. This was a 5-week shoot. It came out in 2020. Where am I at? This thing is starring Andrea Riseborough. I'll just ask you off the bat: did you know her or Chris Abbott, the two characters that play Voss? Did you
No,
know them from anything?
I don't recognize them from anything, but they do seem familiar. You know what
Yeah.
I'm saying? Now there are a couple actors in this film that I am familiar with, but obviously Sean Bean,
Yep.
right? And the lady who plays what's the name of Sean Bean's daughter?
Oh, Ava
Ava.
Tuppence Middleton is the
I kept
actress.
messing me up because we just talked about Ex Machina and the name there of the robot is Ava. But she played Riley in Sense8, which I've been watching for the first time. I'm in season 2 and I'm loving that show. And I love her in that. So it's interesting to see her in a very different role.
Right. No, for sure, dude. Sean Bean's the one that stuck out to me. Here's another one that I noticed while I was doing research on it. Rossif Sutherland is Michael. That's the husband. That is half brother of Kiefer Sutherland and son of Donald Sutherland.
Oh, interesting. Oh, and also Jennifer Jason Leigh is the boss of the corporation, the assassination corporation or whatever, right?
Yeah, and she's really good at it too. But this was one I tried to look up the budget on this, and I could not find any info on the budget. The box office, it made less than $1 million, so it made 900,000 at the box office. It's critically acclaimed. It's kind of what you would think from a movie like this. It's got great critics numbers, at 94% on Rotten Tomatoes, and then the Google users is only at 68%, and IMDb at 6.5. Because it's definitely not a film for everybody. And even myself, I would say it's not a film for every day. It's not one that you're just like, oh, let's throw it on. It's a nice sunny day. Let's toss on Possessor. But it did get a lot of
not necessarily fun, right? That's what you're like. It's not necessarily a fun movie, but it's a really it's a pretty solid one.
Right. You maybe you know how to pronounce this, dude. It won the Best Film and Best Director award at the Sitges Award.
Sounds good to me, brother.
Yeah. Evidently, it's a big Italian horror and sci-fi festival. One of the biggest horror sci-fi festivals in the world, and it won Best Picture and Best Director for that. And then it won another bunch of prizes at another French film festival that I'm not even going to attempt to pronounce that one. But so it did good on those fronts. And what the hell else was I get right there? Well, I'm losing it. Whatever. We'll just move into the damn thing. That's the thing. I set up too many things. I got too many moving parts. But let's just begin there, man. I didn't set up the premise. Basically, what this story is about. It's about the character of Tasia Voss, who's got a very tricky to pronounce first name. Tasia Voss, played by Andrea Riseborough at first, and then later by Chris Abbott. But she is this assassin that works for this group where they kidnap people, they go into their minds, they control these people, and then they assassinate people using those bodies, and then they kill themselves at the end, and it brings them out. It's kind of like the Matrix Manchurian Candidate kind of a vibe, right? But we're just gonna talk about the opening scene here. So it starts out. The movie begins, and we'll be obviously getting into spoilers at this point. The movie begins, and we just meet this woman, and she appears to be working at a casino. She walks in just very casual, like she's going to work, and then just stabs the living hell out of this like 350-pound guy. In one of the more violent, bloody scenes, especially an opening scene to a sci-fi movie that you'll ever see. And it turns out that this is Voss. She's in this body. Afterwards, she tries to kill herself, and this is the first sign that she has some kind of problem where she's not in complete control of the host that she's supposed to be controlling because she's struggling to kill herself. The cops come in, she turns the gun on the cops, and the cops kill her. So it's suicide by cop. So what I wanted to start out by asking is just, what did you think of the opening scene? This is a lot like what we're going to talk about next week, the opening scene of Shivers, where there's just like brutal rape at the beginning of it, or this really overtly violent sexual thing. This is minus the sexual part. But what did you think of like the effectiveness of the scene, the way that they set up the premise in this scene, and then the way that violence is used, not necessarily like just in this scene, but throughout the film in general? Like is it in an envelope pushing way? Is it a cheap, gratuitous way? Like, what's your opinion on that?
Well, first of all, I got to clarify. I watched the uncut version, which you have, right? And that was what's on Hulu.
I don't think you can find the uncut version. or the uncut.
The cut version.
Yeah, the cut version.
Yeah,
Yeah.
good. But that was the one that was released theatrically, which apparently very little people saw. And there's not much added to the runtime, but there's more violence and there's more dicks. Right? I don't think there's any dicks in the last one. I really was surprised at the amount of dicks in this film, but
Yeah. There's plenty of dicks in Infinity Pool too. So you just
nice. I mean, we've already seen Vigo's dick in Eastern Promises, which was Daddy's film. Anyway, so I really liked the opening. Now, when I first watched this movie, I didn't know anything about it. I didn't know what the plot was. I somehow in the back of my head, because of the title, I thought it may be something about like demonic possession or maybe like a techno magic kind of possession or something like that. And so I didn't know what was going on in this movie. And it starts off, like you were saying, with the violence, but like before that, you see the woman put the shit in her head, like the Matrix, and she's turning the dial. And it seemed to me like she was, at first I thought that she was like giving herself emotion, right? Because one time I wrote this story about like people that go to a club and instead of going and getting a drink, they like plug up, and it gives them the sense of togetherness and community or something like that, right? That you get when you're like going out clubbing and you're on the dance floor and you're on chemicals, you know, and things like that. So I was really puzzled. And then when the turn happened where she just walks up in that place and just starts stabbing that dude. Now, we've seen plenty of movies with this level of violence. Right. But what I loved about this was, especially, I mean, obviously each movie where we watch at any given time is influenced by where you are, your mental state, and what you've been absorbing. So the last film I watched before this was Ex Machina for the first time, which I loved, gave a perfect score to on Monday night.
Hell yeah.
So I'm watching this film. I'm like, okay, it's another deliberately paced kind of slow film. Well, when that happened, it cranked that pace up.
Right.
And the violence was such a shock to the system because we've all seen it. We've all been around. We've seen A24 films. We've seen these pretentious films. You know what I'm saying? That have this like, oh, I'm going to have a slow pace and we're going to think about this movie and we're not going to take you for granted and all that. So I'm like, okay, we're down for that. And then when that happened, it was so perfectly placed because I'm already excited and interested and engaged because of what is going on previous to that. But then when you do that, that's when like I'm in popcorn mode. Bro.
Right.
You know how we are. We're on blood splatter chatter right now, bro. Like, I'm just like, do it. Just like, and it's like pouring out, very effectively done, physical effects as well as some digital stuff. And it worked. And it brought me right into the movie, and it made me more interested and made me more understanding that this was going to be a film that would be cerebral and deliberate, but at the same time, shockingly violent and in your face about it. And I didn't even know the half of it because the dicks hadn't even shown up yet. You know what I'm saying?
Hell yeah, dude. Well put, man. I'm glad you brought up the bit with the little bit of technology that they're using where it's like Voss has to, she has to like reset her like baseline or something. You can tell like they put some bit of technology into her head, which this is another thing that's cool where it looks like it's not like a touch screen. It's like this kind of 80s looking, 90s looking type of device because this
very
is
analog, right? It
yeah.
feels like, yeah, it's like, you know, I don't, some people maybe watching may not remember this, but you know, when you would have like a TV and you would have to like turn the knob and you'd have to sometimes go in between the channels to get the signal right, you know?
Right. And it's oh, there goes that brain not working again. But it gives you like that old school vibe. Oh, that's what I was gonna say. It's supposed to be, and I didn't really pick up on this the first time. It's supposed to be like an alternate reality. You know what I mean? One of those sci-fi movies that's just a slight variation on Earth as it is. So that's what the technology is a little bit off. You see someone using like a kind of an older phone at one point, like a 2005 phone and things like that. But
yeah, because it's technically it's set in the past, but an alternate past, which I didn't pick up on at first, actually.
Yeah. But what that scene does, what them using that technology, it gives the actors that do it a chance to really flex their muscles. Because what it appears to do is like they put it in their head and it makes them like really sad or like really emotional. And then they have to like get themselves back to a base like normalness. So everybody is kind of interesting watching the three actors that get a chance to do it, kind of like go through those emotions, you know?
Yeah, it's really cool. And when you watch, when you've completed the film and you make it through, you kind of understand a little bit more about why that's so important. It's because there's that, I don't know what they call it. They call it charring, and they call it like shedding and all this kind of stuff. But like, there is the danger of the personalities of the person you're possessing and yourself kind of intermingling.
Right.
And that's what's happening to her. So much so that, I know you're about to get into act 1, but so much so that the way that she practices, what's his name? Colin, the way she's practicing his lines, like how he would speak to his girlfriend, she does the same thing to her about her kid and her husband. And because like she has, identity is a big part of this film, right? And I know we're getting into all of that, but that to me was like a very early indication, even though we didn't know what the hell was going on at first, right? At all.
That's one of the things that I kind of like about it. Just like you're saying, it basically the first act of the film, and out there, nobody quote me on these acts. Even when I sent you the rundown, I'm like, act 1, act 2, act 3. I think that's what it is.
I think you totally nailed the act structure.
Okay. I felt pretty good. But basically the first act that we get, it's all Andrea Riseborough playing Voss. And it's her, she's coming back from this assassination attempt. You learn a little bit about her work life and then her family life. And that to me was the bit after the violent bit that really like got me engrossed in the movie, is when you see her sitting there practicing her lines. She's about to go into her ex-husband's house and she's like, "Oh, hey, it's good to see you. Oh, thank you. I'm starving." Like expecting them to say, "I've got food." But what you don't know at that point is what you said. Like you don't find out till later that that's how she practices going into these other people's minds. And that kind of the structure of that and what you learn first, like it really hit me later when you see her practicing for her job. It's like, oh, she right from the get-go, she's struggling to remain who she is or to know who she is. So it's an interesting struggle.
But she's actively being her identity is actively being remanufactured by her job.
Right.
And I mean, just think about our world in America and think about what jobs do to people, how they change people and they mold people. And this movie's got a lot of themes and go ahead. I'm sorry.
No,
I'm rambling now, man.
No, you're great, dude. Let me ask you this. This is something that me and my fiance were talking about last night when we watched it. As I said, the second act, it's before you go in, before Andrea Riseborough playing the Voss character, is before she goes into another body. As we're meeting her, she has sex with her husband. At one point, while she's having sex, and this is showing how her job and the violence that she is dealing with in her job are affecting her life, she's having sex with her husband. She's not really into it. And then she has this flash of the murder that she committed earlier, stabbing this guy in the neck. At that point, she looks at his neck and she kind of gets this like, and then she bites his neck during sex, and now all of a sudden she's into it. Did you read that as the violence turned her on, or did you read it as like, oh, I'm going to distract myself from this with sex?
Yeah, the violence turned her on.
Right.
That's exactly what that was, bro. And now, the next time one of my partners comes at my neck that viciously, I'm going to be like, whoa, what are you remembering right now?
That's you put that on the cover right there. Cerebral and full of dicks.
It's a quote for the next special edition 4K of Possessor from Scarface.
And for this channel itself. Full of dicks.
Cerebral and full of dicks.
Real quick, what's up to everybody in the chat, man? Sam's in here. We got Two Gun, Brad, Frazier in the house, Bobby De La Ghetto, Manny is up in here. Evan was in here, Dylan's little brother in the house. I think I already said Two Gun, but it's always worth saying them twice. I appreciate y'all you guys being here. And Fable is up in the house. He'll be on the show with us next week. All right, so what did you think overall of this first act? Like I said, we don't really get a whole lot other than meeting meeting Voss, her work life and her family life. What do you think of Andrea Riseborough as the character of Voss and her performance and just this first act in general?
Her performance is very cold, and I think it's supposed to be, right? We're being introduced to a woman who's being used and manipulated by the corporation that she works for, right? And she even has this very ghastly appearance. If you look up image search, if you Google image search this woman, she looks way different.
It's crazy. Right? She's hot in real life. She's not in this movie.
No, and that's intentional, right? They're trying to show that she's being used up. And she's losing her sense of self. And this is something that we learn narratively as the movie progresses. But in the beginning, we're getting clues of it visually. And then we get the test, and we get her with, is it Gerda or something like that, right? Her boss or whatever, Jennifer, Jason Lee. And if my buddy Joe Corallo was here, he would say that we have a problem in movies right now where they think that the audience is dumb. They have to spoon feed everything to us. They don't do that. Just like with Ex Machina, which we talked about on Monday night, the exposition comes through naturally and organically, right? They allow us to start piecing this together. And there's a lot of clues that are laid in that first act that ultimately result in the reveal of the third act and the culmination of everything. I think that the first act is incredibly solid because of the way it's reflective of the next two acts as well. There are scenes in this that get repeated. There are ideas and themes that get repeated. There's even images that get repeated. And I loved this first act. I think she did a great job in this performance because it's hard to play a detached, broken, cold person, but still somehow compel the audience into caring about your story. So between concept and the character, what little we were getting at that time, because they very quickly build in and they make her sympathetic. And we think, oh, she wants to be with her estranged husband. She's missing her kid. We're learning all of this. That's not the journey. That's the backstory. And so they're giving us the backstory in an active fashion in the first act that I thought was absolutely splendid. Instead of saying, oh, she has a husband, she has a kid, she misses him. They show us the action of it while making us think that we're being they make us think that something is being revealed to us that's not so essential, or that they make us think that something's being revealed to us that's more essential than it actually turns out to be. Because the plot of the movie, the actual point of the movie, is how this organization, this corporation, this agency, whatever it is trying to pull her away from those attachments, right? So we think she's attached when literally she's on the last thread at this point. So in hindsight, it elevates that first act for me. And I think her performance is great because of it.
Oh yeah, dude. It's I like that you mentioned that because she stays somewhat likable, might be a little bit too far, but bordering on likable, even though you know what she is. Like it's a really interesting performance. Also, what's interesting is as violent as the character is, you don't see that actress act violent. For the most part, you do get one little bit at the end of the movie, but for the most part, you see her being vulnerable. You know, when she's at work, she's tore apart from that mission. At home, she's struggling. But you know, if you wrote down on paper what this character is, you wouldn't think you would be sympathetic for her. So it's well written and well performed in that regard.
Did Brandon write this one?
Yeah.
Okay. So like what he's doing with the script, which I think is brilliant, is he's making us feel, oh, she misses her kids. What she's doing is getting like the typical assassin story. Oh, this is too much for me. It's breaking me down. No, the killing's not what's fucking her up. What's fucking her up is the idea that she's losing her sense of self, right? And we're misled in that first act. And then when we get to the ultimate everything, it recontextualizes that first act. And that's what a great first act does. It just doesn't introduce the concept, the story, and the characters, but it almost kind of tells you the end in a very subtle way that you don't notice until you watch the movie again. And movies with rewatchability are better than movies that are just dick and fart jokes. You know what I'm saying?
Right. Even though some of those dick and fart jokes, those movies might be the most rewatchable.
I mean, I love them too, but the first time I watched American Pie was the best time I ever watched American Pie.
You're smoking crack. I don't know. I say Talladega Night with the 15th time I hear him say, if you ain't first, you're last. I don't know. I think it's funnier. But
there you go.
That's the stupid comedy movies. But okay,
I got movies like that too, man.
Let me see how bad I can fuck up trying to tell us what happens in the second act. Let's give it a shot. So basically, as we mentioned a couple times, we see the Voss character go out on this mission, and she's scoping out Chris Abbott. Chris Abbott's oh shit, I'm sorry. Hold on. She's scoping out the person that she's gonna kill. Basically, the mission that she is given is that there's this company. She needs to kill the CEO of this company and the CEO's daughter. And basically it's not important, but her company, I think, is then gonna gain control of this company. So they're trying to
there's like a stepson or something, right? That's going to inherit the company, and they're going to wind up with shares and, of course, a fee. But because now they know that this dude hired them to kill these people, they have dirt on him, and therefore now they have a control over that company. So it's an interesting thing because it goes into the idea of corporate espionage more. It goes into so much about that because it's about what this organization is doing to this one person, but also what their ultimate goal is. Their ultimate goal is control. And it gives you a little bit of a clue through the intransparency of these corporate entities and how they operate and why they operate the way they do.
Right. So we see Voss, and she's just like you said earlier, she's watching through a telescope from one building to another building, and she's studying this character that she's going to become. And then the next day, she is that character. There's a little bit where evidently they kidnap him. She goes into his body, and now she's living this guy's life. So we get some what you would expect, some awkward interactions with the character. This guy now played by Chris Abbott. We see awkward interactions with his girlfriend when she now goes to work in this body. She has like this breakdown. She's losing control and she's struggling to control the body pretty much. So what did you think? And then it leads up to the second assassination attempt, which is just as brutal, probably more so than the first one. So what did you think of Chris Abbott now playing the role of Voss? And just before we get to the rest of the second act, just like, how do you think the movie juggles having these two actors play this one leading role?
I think it handles it incredibly well, because the other thing is that Chris Abbott is not just playing Voss. He's playing Voss in Colin's body.
Right.
With Colin still being back there somewhere. Right. And so you get the idea. And one of the things is we're not introduced to Colin too much before, so we don't see the differences.
Right.
But the differences that Ava sees, we pick up on that awkwardness, like you were mentioning, right? But he's also playing this where Voss is kind of confused and kind of like stumbling, but she's also having trouble integrating into this identity. Mm-hmm. And that's something that gets explored in that second act, like with the sex scene, right? Mm-hmm. Where look at the juxtaposition. Like I was talking about how certain scenes and certain images and certain things get repeated. There's the scene where she's in his body doing his job, and he's watching these women, or this woman and this dude get it on, and he's feeling things, right? And one of the first things she does when she gets in this body is like touches his dick, right. Like, oh, I got a dick, I'm a different person. And and like when they're having sex, Ava and Colin are having sex, she's enjoying it. She's enjoying it as a man,
right,
in this body, this connection, way more than with her actual husband in her own body.
Right.
And so I think that the dude, whoever plays Colin, is doing such a freaking good job because he's playing two roles at the same time.
Right.
And Voss does that too, but he has to carry more of that burden in that second act because it is his. And it's easy to disengage with a character when the physical traits completely change. This movie does a great job of making you continuously compelled with this character. There is a thread where I never felt like that wasn't Voss in there. But then as the act was progressing, I realized how much of a hold Colin was starting to get back.
Right.
And how much more of a blend and a meld was happening. So I actually think the approach was amazing. I think both performers did exceptionally well. I don't know if they worked together on certain things, but like, you can tell when Colin's in control and when Voss is in control.
Right.
And that's something that I think is really solid.
You can tell like when they're struggling for that control too. Because it's Chris Abbott is the name of the male actor that plays Voss. And he does really a great job at being disturbed. And honestly, like the second time I watched this movie, it started to stress me out. He started to make me a little anxious with his level of anxiety and just confusion. It adds to it too that Voss is lying to the people that he works for the whole time. They're like, hey, your levels just spiked. What's going on? It's like, nothing. It must be on your end, which is an interesting layer to it. What do you think of the visual? I don't know what you'd call them. The little weird little bits that you get, these psychedelic visual moments that are pretty much representations of Voss kind of losing control of her mind. What did you think of? Because there's some people that would say it's just a bunch of trippy imagery. I've seen actually negative things about it. I think it's pretty goddamn dope and it looks cool as hell. What do you think it adds something to the movie?
Oh, I think so. I think that struggle with the identity is something that's important to the theme, and I think it does add a lot to the movie. The one thing I couldn't really never really figure out exactly what was going on was when he would see, or when they would see, the little bit of something, right? And they would try to grab it, but it was gone. And like I don't understand that, but I think that was the formation of a crack or some kind of oddity, like something that's not supposed to be there, something with perception. Like, I don't know, right? But the way it builds into that and the struggle, because we're being led through this entire movie to think that the struggle is that, oh, she's an assassin, she doesn't want to be. That's not ultimately necessarily the case, or where this story is going and how it's developing, right? So all of those bits, I love this shit. And I think this is more in Act 3, but where we're seeing him put on her face.
Yes.
On her flesh. Long live the new flesh.
Right. Yeah. Dude, you should have said it right there. This is screamed at the top of his lungs. Right. No, it's really damn cool. I don't know if maybe because I saw an interview where David Cronenberg talks about him and his cinematographer. He left out the fact that they were smoking a bunch of weed and probably doing LSD. He didn't mention that, but I'm sure they were. And he just said like him and his cinematographer hung out for days and days in one of their apartments and just played with gels to make these visual things. Do you know what the fuck that is? Like, I think it's actual gels and like putting them on between like glass plates. Have you ever heard about that process? Do you know anything about what I'm talking about?
Just a little bit. The technical side of a lot of special effects is lost to me, but are you one thing I do love is like the melting of the body. Like when she's going into his body, like her body melts and then reforms as his and stuff like that. So I it's interesting that you mentioned that Brandon Cronenberg and his DP like had a few days to like play around with this stuff.
Yeah.
But as far as I'm aware, maybe that's what it is. I don't really know actually.
He says it was all of the effects. Well, he says 100% of the movie is in camera. From what he says there's small tiny things that aren't even worth mentioning that aren't in camera, like probably silly things, taking wrinkles out of someone's shirt or something. But so all those effects you see, somehow they were able to create that in a practical way. So it's cool as shit. It's super trippy and psychedelic. And how about the part where their faces are connected? And this comes later too, but they like separate. And there's like this, you could tell there's like a mask on Chris Abbott's face that's smashed together, and they just like ripped apart from each other. It's the cover to this pretty much. It's the cover to the movie.
Yeah, it's a really creepy image, and I really, really like it. It's striking and it's scary. There are elements of this movie that are truly, genuinely terrifying because so much of it is speaking on actual things that are going on.
Hell yeah. All right, so as I said, that's pretty much what we get. We get Voss more and more losing her mind, and then it becomes the night of the next assassination that she's supposed to do. She's got to kill Sean Bean and his daughter, which is the person whose body she's in's girlfriend. So they go to this party. There's an awkward bit where she's supposed to cause a scene with Sean Bean. It's very awkward, very effective. She blows up in the party in this other body, gets kicked out, comes back later after the party is over. And this was all to put on a show and make people believe that it actually is this guy that's going to kill Sean Bean's character and not someone else. Comes back and kills him in another extremely violent way. He's dead, or actually he's not dead, because it turns out he lives through this whole ordeal, which I did pick up on.
Which is very ironic considering that Sean Bean dies in everything he's in.
It looks like he kills the shit out of the guy.
Yeah,
he's beating him like forever.
And then when you see him, he's got like an eye patch.
Yeah, he goes and he digs in his eye and pokes it out after wiggling around in his throat for a while.
The part with the throat where he's like knocking teeth out and shit, dude. That got to me, right? And that's one of the elements. Those are the moments where like effects and body horror really get to you. Like teeth get to me, right? I've had teeth problems throughout the majority of my adult life. My teeth almost killed me one time, right? So the idea of seeing teeth come out in a realistic fashion, like you said, everything being done in camera, adds to that visceralness of it, that rawness, right? And it's just something that is inside of all of us. We all have had toothaches. Imagine having somebody throw a fucking fire poker into your fucking throat and just ripping all your teeth out, man.
Right. It's crazy that he lived. I actually didn't pick up on it. I must have missed it. Did you pick up on it? Did they show him later on in the movie?
Who? Sean Bean?
Yeah.
Yeah, they show him later on because he's got like a patch over his eye and he's got like a little scarring on his on his mouth. Because when they reveal that he's alive, they like there is one bit where they show him, and I don't.
Oh, now I'm envisioning it. It's funny that you mentioned the violence helping the pacing because I actually had like written in my questions, and then I deleted it. Like, does the violence in this movie help with the pacing? And I'm like, yeah, that seems like because it obviously does. It is a slow movie. I've watched this 3 times now, which you should be asking yourself, and why didn't you notice Sean Bean making his appearance later on?
Yeah, I only watched it the one time, and I remembered that, man. Come on.
The first time I watched it, I remember enjoying it as a whole. I was like, oh, well, this fucking movie's awesome. Put it on a list. We'll cover this later. The time that I watched it after I asked you if I wanted or if you wanted to do this movie and you said yes, after you agreed to it, I watched it again. I think this is going to be a struggle for me when I do these movie reviews. I need to get other people's opinions out of my head. I'm watching it, think like, oh, this is fucking too boring. Oh, this is too slow. And for whatever reason, like the second time I watched the movie, like the pace didn't work for me. I watched it again last night and the pace was not a problem at all. Like it was, I don't know, it was the strain I was on that day. It was the mental space I was in when I watched it the second time. You kind of touched on it earlier. Does the pacing overall for the movie work for you? Do you find it slow in a good way or what?
Yeah, I think it's I think it's slow in a good way, and I think it ramps up in an exceptional way when it needs to, right? This movie is less than 2 hours long. Any other fucking hack out there in Hollywood today makes this movie, it's 2.5 hours because they're so self-important. They got to divulge all this. They got to show this. Bruh, this movie gets to it. It doesn't waste space. It's economic in a very good way. Not in a cookie cutter way, but a very solid way. I think the pace of this movie is absolutely perfect. I never felt bored. I never was taken out of this film. I was truly engaged all the way through. Even when I had to pause it to go take a whiz or whatever, like I was still actively engaged. It did not overstay its welcome. Some movies need to be long. We've talked about movies that maybe they should have had 15 more minutes and it could have been better. This movie was perfect. Now, I know it was a little bit shorter and its theatrical release, less dicks, right? But this one absolutely works. And I do believe that the violence in this film is perfectly placed to raise that pace and excitement up in certain moments, because otherwise this is not a very exciting movie.
Yeah.
You know, and if you're not into gore, it may not still be an exciting movie, but it's something that's going to shock you. It lulls you in. It makes you think. It makes you empathize, understand at times, and then that shock to the system.
Yeah. That's why I just described it to my fiance because I was asking her if you want to watch this movie with me tonight, and she's asking about it. I'm like, it's a slow burn with sudden bursts of extreme violence, and there's 3 of them. They're spaced out pretty nicely through the movie because you could get to the point, but it is also really engaging leading up, especially to that second burst of violence. But like you said, it ramps it up. You're more intimate with the characters at that point. And it's also more violent. So it is like it ramps up the violence in a smart way.
Yeah, and I do want to say something to Jay Nunya out there. All horror films are not economically paced. Just watch Terrifier 2.
Hey, shots fired. I agree on that. I like Terrifier 2 a lot. Oh, there's a lot of we watch a fucking lot of movies that could have been shaved about 10-15 minutes.
Absolutely.
I will say all horror movies should be economic, but not all of them fucking actually get there. But a lot of it's hard to find a slasher movie that's beyond an hour and a half that's worth watching. So I'll say that a lot of the slasher movies tend to be under an hour and a half.
Yeah, if you're trying to make a 2.5 hour long slasher movie, you need to rethink some shit.
Right.
Some people need to be telling you no.
Back to Terrifier 2. All right, so the third act of this movie, it's post assassination. Once again, Voss, now inside this dude's body, tries to kill herself, can't kill herself because the guy is in partial control. And then the way I understand this and this is actually the way that I read it in on Wikipedia. I went and hadn't just read through the plot rundown to see if I was missing anything. And it says that at this point, the male character takes control of his body and he stabs himself in the head, damaging the piece of technology that's keeping her in the body. And pretty much what ends up happening, it traps her in the body. We see Voss's body back. I was going to say the real world, but it's not the Matrix. Wherever she is, her body where it's being kept, it starts oozing blood out of it. So her physical body is in danger. She's trapped in this body. Now we have Colin, played by Chris Abbott. He's running a muck trying to figure out why he just killed his girlfriend, why he killed her husband or tried to kill, or excuse me, her father. And he ends up running around. He ends up with this girl that he's cheating on his fiance with. Some guy that
Not
used to
cheating. She said that Ava was cool with it. Maybe they're in a poly relationship, bro. Come on.
Right. Well, you know what? I'm glad you stopped me there, because that was a bit that really got me thinking this last watch through during the second act, while like I was imagining like entering someone else's body and like you're living their life. What's normal to me is not going to be normal to them. And when they're at that party and this girl just walks in and sits on the toilet, starts pissing in front of them. It's like one of those things, like, you know what I mean? If my fiance did that, totally normal. If my neighbor came over and did that, super fucking weird. You know what I mean? It's just like, I thought that was a really subtle way of just like, and he reacts to it like strangely at the time, of just kind of demonstrating the oddness of being in someone's life, and also showing you might be fucking weird, but you've just normalized your weirdness. We all have weird things about us, you know?
Well, Verno, if you jumped into my head and lived a week in my life, you would be like, what the fuck, Rob? You know what I'm saying? You'd be like, this is your life? You know,
well, that's what you would do. I was thinking the same thing. It would be like, I remember, I'll share too much right now. I was dating a girl like years and years ago, like 10, 15 years ago, and she moved in. And after like a week, she was like, this is what the fuck you do? Like, you just sit around with your friends playing NBA Jam and smoking weed? Like, what the fuck? Like,
isn't that what everybody does?
Yeah, her new norm it did not work out for her. Like, I haven't talked to this woman in years. I'll just say it that way. But yeah, it is. You enter someone else's life, and that's the same way with any relationship. That is what is going on. You're now entering another life, and you're getting a side of people that you don't normally see. But it's an interesting way to go about showing that in the movie.
Yeah, I think so. And I love the addition of that character, because and when he starts struggling, so I get the idea that he's starting to assert some control, right? But what's more important to me about the third act is that it's a blend of Voss and Colin, right? It's a blend of both of them. She is finding it hard to kill herself, not because of the resistance of the person she's possessing, but because she is getting lost in the identity of the person she's possessing. That's allowing the assertion of control.
Right.
Does that make sense? Do you get what I'm saying there?
No, yeah, perfectly. And he starts
she's like the sex scene that I was talking about, right? She's not pleased. She's not sexually satisfied in her own real life.
Right.
But then she starts seeing like what that can feel like.
Right.
And maybe what it feels like on the other side.
I love that somehow we've mentioned this sex scene like 3 or 4 times, and we haven't mentioned the pan down shot that it does, where it starts up here and it's this sexy female body. You get some breasts and it keeps going, and there's a fully erect penis attached to that body. It's like, it's very striking.
I like that shit, man. I'm going to let this be known. I'm sex positive. I'm into shit. I don't kink shame. I'm into weird shit. Y'all are into weird shit. We're all into the shit that we're into, right? But I fucking applaud a director who, because there's a no penis policy in Hollywood film.
Totally.
When I worked at the movie theater, during that time, Fight Club and Scary Movie 2 came out. Maybe it was Scary Movie 1. I don't remember. The one where the dick goes through the fucking dude's ear.
Yeah.
The Scream 2, the knife in the bathroom stall.
I think it's
glory hole, right? But when those movies came out, I had to card people at the door to the theater, like walking into the actual theater, like not at the box office, at the actual theater. Why are we so scared of penises? Like,
I don't know.
Show me as much penis as you want. Show me an erect penis. You know when the last time I saw an erect penis in a movie was? It's a porn. You know what I'm saying? But that's boldness, but it's real. It's real life. And we're dealing with a story about identity and a slight theme of gender fluidity, right? And the idea of how much the body actually matters to our mental state and our identity within there. It's
Totally.
playing with some really interesting ideas, man. And if one day you woke up with a vagina and some tits, your sexuality might be a little bit different.
Right.
You know
You
what I'm
probably
saying?
wouldn't see me for a while.
No shit.
What's Verno doing? Why are her hands all pruned
Just
all the time?
fucking masturbating all the time.
All right. So, okay. Long story short, the where the third act ends up in this climactic finish, Voss in Chris Abbott's body, in this man's body, goes back to her house. He starts. You see pretty cool visual representations of him searching Voss's memories. So now, not only does she have access to his memories, but he's now violating her brain and going into her memories, going into her life, and shows up at her house, puts the husband at gunpoint. He's wanting to know. It's really cool because he's like, "Where is your wife?" It's like, she's in your head, bro. Like, that's where she is. He obviously, the husband, doesn't know anything about it. Things continue, and now Voss like appears. So we have these two characters that have been playing the same role the whole time. They're having a conversation and they're going back and forth. And there's a really, really cool line that I thought was pretty damn interesting that ties into the thematics of the whole thing, where the male character says to Voss's husband and basically explains to him, what is it? Toxoplasmosis? It's about toxoplasmosis. I got a 9-month-old now. So when my wife was pregnant, or my fiance was pregnant, she can't clean the litter box. You ever hear that? Like, pregnant women can't clean the litter box. It's because there's this virus or something in there called toxoplasmosis.
Parasites, right?
This parasite, that's what it is. Can go into your body, go into your mind, and there's reports of that specific parasite like controlling people's behavior. Like, I guess like 50% of the population in America has toxoplasmosis. And I didn't research this. This is just something I heard a while ago. So if I'm fucking this up, I apologize. But basically, if you have that, you are more prone to do dangerous behaviors. You're more likely to fucking ride motorcycles, jump out of airplanes, and to act violently. So it's part of the whole theme is, and I akin it to like an idea. Like, that's what it is to me. It's like he's basically saying, so your wife does this, she gets a worm in her head, and then next thing you know, she gets an idea. And you got to ask yourself, where'd that idea come from? You or the worm? Who are you married to, your wife or the worm? And I look at just any old regular idea. I could infect you with an idea, and you can't get it out of your head if it's a good enough idea. If there's something there, and it might be a good idea that's a bad idea at the same time. But it's an interesting thing. What do you think of that whole idea, that line that he says?
I really like it because I think it really drives in some of the thematic material here, right? The worm in our head that's causing us to act different. Is our identity us? Are we actually self-actualizing? Or are we allowing other people to do that? How many people do you know? How many times in your life have you done this where you say you're with a new partner? Right? You're in the midst of new romantic energy. You're vibing, you're feeling. Everybody, when they first meet somebody, is putting up a front, right? Of the perfect version of themselves. And then all of a sudden you hear that this new potential partner, maybe they like this. Maybe they like that. You're like, oh, I'm like that, but you're really not. And you absorb something new into your identity. Now, it can be, this is how it is when you meet people. People change you. Totally. Right? Especially important people you love, people you care about, people that love you, care about you. When they say that you are the people that you're with, they ain't lying. You know what I'm saying? But on the other side, it's not just relationships, whether romantic or sexual or platonic or whatever. It's also your work environment. It's also the corporate environment that you exist in, right? Or it's also the media. The worm could be the media. The worm could be your job. The worm could be a new relationship. And at a certain point, you do have to question how many of my decisions, how much of my identity is from me, and how much of it is from an outside force. And a lot of us, if we did that hard work, and those of us who have done that hard work, it's scary. It's fucking terrifying to realize how influenced we are, right? But only when we realize that influence will we really actually assert any control of our lives?
Right. Well, you say this very profound stuff, and I can't help but giggle at this fucking line from Two Guns. Scarpad is the worm trying to convince me that Burial Ground is a good movie.
You
You
know it,
are
but that worm
correct.
ain't getting no traction, man. No traction.
I will say, dude, that worm is digging into my brain and keeps on making me want to rewatch that movie just
We
to
should
fucking
do it
punish
here.
myself a little
We
bit. I
should
don't know
do it
why.
here again.
Right. All right. So, okay, what happens eventually? And this gets really fucking complicated. It's simple what happens, but it's complicated at the same time. Voss, now in this man's body, they basically put the idea out there that no, you actually want to kill your husband, or you want to detach yourself from your family life so that, and it's pretty much what her company wants from her, is for her to detach herself from her family life and commit 100% to them. So now in this man's body, you see him take I think it's a meat cleaver, cuts off some of his fucking fingers and just slices the shit out of him in like pure rage, kills the husband. And I'm led to believe that that's actually Voss doing that. Did you get that or no?
Yes. Because I
Okay.
think the whole point of this movie is Jennifer Jason Leigh's character has plotted this whole goddamn thing
Okay, yeah.
to make her master assassin.
Right.
Because it's the
let
butterfly.
me just finish it because
Okay,
it's
go ahead.
because right after that bit, she kills the husband, still in this other body. She's turning around, she's catching her breath. All of a sudden, she gets stuck in the neck, just like she did in the opening scene. And instinctively, she turns around and she shoots what turns out to be her son. And so you think for a second, you just think that, oh, damn, the son just saw some stranger killing his father. So he stepped in. You know what I mean? But she turns around at that point after she shot him once in the stomach accidentally. Then you see the representation is now it's Voss in her. You see the woman. So we're showing you this is actually a decision being made by Voss herself. And she, in a total rampage, shoots the shit out of her son, shoots him in the head, blows his head half to pieces, and kills her son, like in a fit of rage. Then the son, somehow, after his head is like fucking half gone, you see him say the line, "Pull me out," which indicates that it wasn't actually the son. This was her boss in her son's body that just did this. But again, it's Voss that killed her son. So I guess it all goes back to what we've been talking about. That worm in her fucking brain has caused her to detach herself from her family, and it was planted there by her boss. Is that pretty much the way you read this whole ending?
Absolutely. And it goes back to that first act, that first conversation with Voss and her boss, right? Where she goes, "Oh, no, no, no. Don't you remember? You're separated from your husband. You're too dangerous for them." Right? Planting those seeds, that insecurity in there, right? She is the worm. She's the ultimate worm. What is ultimately changing Voss in this movie isn't Colin. It isn't any of the people she possesses. It's the job that winds up possessing her. And the cold bit at the end. And by the way, as soon as the gun goes off, I love it when movies make me do this, but I went, "Oh, I knew it was the kid. I fucking knew it was the kid," right? And, you know, back in the day, you can't kill the kid. Plenty of people have done that since then, right? This one was effective as fuck to me, especially with the whole "pull me out."
Right.
Right?
That was
Like,
great.
oh my fucking goodness, man. And it works. It works so well. And I do agree. Like, Voss is the one who does that because the whole point of this movie is her job trying to change her into their mindless drone, which is ultimately what happens because the movie ends colder than it starts.
Yeah. Well said, man. Well said. And well, just to carry on with that, I didn't mention it at the beginning, but after this, you see she survives. She goes back. She's going to continue her job. And there's this thing after every assassination attempt. It kind of reminds me of a lot of like Blade Runner influence on this movie, things that give me Blade Runner vibes. But we have her boss giving her all these different items, and it's like this test.
It's like the Dalai Lama test, right? It's like which ones belong to you in a previous life or in your current life. Yeah.
Right. This
and
is mine. This
is important as shit.
Right.
Because in the beginning, she says, "I killed this butterfly and mounted it when I was a child. I still feel guilty about it." At the end, she doesn't feel guilty about killing the butterfly. The butterfly is signifying her completely cutting off all empathy and love in her life so that she can be what her boss is now, but can no longer truly tolerate, because it will fuck with your mind being in somebody else's body. And that's what happened to Voss in this movie, man.
She is the worm in a way. So, okay, one last thing before I just ask your overall thoughts. We touched on the kid. The thing that I was really interesting to me. We watched, well, I don't want to spoil other movies in which these kids die, but I've noticed a trend. If you're going to kill a kid in a movie, they don't let us get attached to the kid. Like, we don't know this kid's name barely. They might mention it. I don't know his name. There's very little showing this kid in the movie. Do you think it would have been a waste? Because I look at it as like, oh, they didn't go all the way. They made sure we weren't attached to this kid. But maybe that's not what it's about. It's not about like us feeling that gut punch of like, oh no, Billy died at the end. We're supposed to be more focused on Voss's character and her relationship with violence and what it's done to her, kind of. What do you feel about that?
I feel like it was fine, because you don't want to be pay it forward and get super attached to a fucking kid and then die. You don't want to be My Girl and just have people bawling their eyes out, not be able to actually understand the impact of this film and what it's trying to say.
Yeah.
But one thing that we do understand, and once again, we're misled into understanding this in that brilliant first act, is we understand the attachment of a mother away from her child.
Right.
So we get that. We don't know the kid, but we know what the kid is supposed to mean to a mother. And that's why that moment has impact, but not too much impact that distracts us from the actual thoughts that this movie is supposed to be provoking.
Hell yeah. Well, let's talk about your provocative thoughts on the movie overall then, since we've busted through this thing. What did you think of it, brother? I'm getting the feeling that for the most part you enjoyed the film.
I enjoyed the film. I enjoyed it immensely. I thought it was absolutely splendid. I loved it. Like I said, it was cerebral with a lot of dicks, right? And you can quote me on that. No, but I love the boldness of this film. I love the exploration of the themes, identity, corporate environments, and how a job can change the whole worm thing that we were talking about. I mean, there's a lot of stuff to unpack in this movie about corporate power. But it asked this really crazy question, which is the body the foundation of everything, or is the mind, right? Like, you ask a bunch of people, you'll get different answers. What comes first, the soul or the body? What comes first, the mind or the body, right? Well, if we want to look at things strictly biologically, our bodies start forming before the chemical processes that make our minds, right? And who we are, and our ego, and our spiritual self, even if that's what you want to call it, right? But when Voss is in Colin's body, she starts acting out from within that body. And this is where the body horror truly gets in there. There's this body dysmorphia almost that's going on. And you could extrapolate this out and really like go into some main modern themes or whatever. But I think basically what it's saying is that everything starts with the body. When we start feeling anxious, you feel it, right? You feel it physically. When you're feeling sad and depressed, you feel it physically. All these different emotional responses that we have a physical reaction as well.
And vice versa.
Exactly. The mind and the body are not two separate things. It's like space and time. It's one thing together. You can't understand time and you can't without space, and you can't understand space without time and understand that they're the same thing. You can't understand the body without the mind. You can't understand the mind without the body. It's the one thing. It's a body mind. The mind is within the body. There's something very visceral about that. And I love that the movie's playing with those themes on a personal level, but on an external level, it's talking about the idea of manufactured desire, manufactured identity. What's the company that Sean Bean runs? It's a data mining company. These people spy on people through their webcams, through their phones, to see what they're buying so that they can manufacture desire.
Right.
So that they can manufacture identity. It's what companies, media, corporations, and the government do to us. It's what others do to ourselves. It's what our jobs do to us, we lose all sense of self because we allow other people to manufacture our reality. And if it doesn't start from within, that's going to happen. We got to be strong. We got to know that identity is fluid. Who I am today, I could change my mind 6 months from now. And that's okay. Because who I am inside is always going to be true as long as I stay true to myself.
Right.
And on my personal journey, it's been a struggle being such a consumer that I am of pop culture, of comic books, movies, media, books, all that kind of stuff, right? We need to allow this stuff to enhance us, but not manufacture something that we don't want. Like I was saying, when you enter a new relationship with someone and you kind of become a false person, you kind of become this idealized version of yourself that you think they want.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of times why relationships don't work is because we realize that that person that's being projected, us or them, it's not true. And
Right.
so it's a really fucking interesting movie that is cerebral, but gory as fuck. It's bold. It's daring. I fucking love this film, Verno.
Hell yeah, dude. Hell yeah, man. Well, I'm glad, man. I'm really glad. Like I said, last night was the most I enjoyed it. Like it just really hit me. I found it fucking entertaining as hell. I thought it was interesting because I watched some Brandon Cronenberg interviews. He said the seed for the idea was because he was feeling imposter syndrome in a big way. His previous movie came out in 2012, so it was an 8-year journey between that and this, and he was really struggling with his own confidence, I guess, and thinking, am I really a director? Am I a writer? So he was thinking, he felt like he was waking up in someone else's life every day, which I thought was an interesting like seed for this story and kind of what it came out of. He also talked a lot about building what's the fucking word? A narrative, your own narrative to function in the world. And it's not something we consciously think about, but it is something we tell ourselves. Like we have to okay, I have to without being conscious of it. Clearly, if I was going to put together a show, I have to tell myself okay, you have some worth to give to a show. You know what I mean? Like if you didn't at least give yourself that story, you wouldn't be able to function on the planet. You know what I mean?
Well, I like what you were saying there because the idea of building our own narrative, what's the other option? Allowing other people to build it for us.
Right.
And that's what's happening to everybody in this fucking movie. Even Colin without Voss or Vox or whatever her fucking name is. But even Colin before all of that, we get the idea through his life, not through exposition, but through organic explanation and through dialogue. He's not in a happy spot. He's not cool with his life. He's in a job he hates because he feels like he has to take it to prove something to this fucking woman that he loves. Shit ass fucking dad. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
I hate to do this, man. I got to pee really bad.
Oh, you're good. You're good.
I'm so sorry, man. I made it an hour. I had to pee like 40 minutes ago. I'll be right back.
Yeah, go ahead. All right, let's say what's up to the chat. We got GT Comics in the mother trucking house. Anybody out there, if you have seen Possessor, go ahead and put your letter grade, or if you want to do out of 5, out of 10, whatever you want to do. If you want to rate the movie in some form, I and Robbie, we will be using a letter grading system to grade this thing. So if you've seen Possessor, go ahead and throw your ratings down in the chat below, and I'll go ahead and promo what we got going on next week, man. I realized that I'm doing Possessor, and then later in the month, Dylan on Dylan's Horror Show, we're going to be talking about The Fly from Brandon Cronenberg. So I figured I wanted to just make a little Cronenberg month out of the thing. And next week I'll be talking about Shivers with Steph, aka The Missing Link, and Fable from One Collection Down. They'll be joining me. We'll talk about it's not David Cronenberg's first film, but it's his first what's the word for it? His 2 previous films were underground films back in the early 70s. I guess that's how I put it. So 75, Cronenberg's first film, a very influential early movie that out of his career, one of the early American '70s horror films that one of the best early '70s American horror films, in my humble opinion. So, has anyone out there seen Possessor? Did anybody watch this thing? I'm not seeing anything from the chat. I'm kind of curious what a missing link. Wonder if you ended up watching this thing, what you would think about it, man. Same with you, Fable. Hey, there's the
So sorry, Verno.
No,
I'm
it's
so
good, bro.
unprofessional, man. Shit.
No, it's perfect. It gave me a chance to plug some shit. What? And then while I'm on that tip, because I'm like, why do I have this other movie here? We're gonna be talking about Street Trash. This is a Scarpad pick. So if anybody wants to skip Dylan's horror show, this would probably be the week to do it. No, I'm just joking. It's gonna be a fuckload of fun. I have not watched this, but Scarpad did send it to me. I have a barbecue on Saturday, but since he sent it to me, I'm gonna watch it tonight, and I'm gonna just sneak off into my car and do a little bit of the review on DHS on Saturday night from the barbecue in my car.
Yeah, my plan is to pop it in tonight if I can, if I have time, and I don't seem to have anything extra going on, and maybe pop into DHS. I got major plans Saturday night, but like I want to pop in and speak on this movie because I don't want people to be too hard on it. Because this movie's trying to do something, and I think it does it. I think it does it.
Good. I'm excited about it. I've honestly
sleazy and trashy, bro.
I've had a lack of smut in my life recently. It feels like I've been watching a lot of like heady slow burns. I'm totally up for some 80s trash, to be honest with you. But okay, so I gave my overall thoughts. I fucking love the movie as well, man. I think it's there's no way I could say it any better than what you just said it. So I'll just jump on the Robbie train and say I agree with everything you said. Two Gun gives it a minus B or a B minus? A minus B. So, all right. Robbie, what is your letter grade? And if you feel the need to try and convince me that letter grades are for children and that I should go with a different, more mature grading system, then feel free to.
There's nothing wrong with the letter grade because, for instance, me at PCP, what we like to do is the 5 out of 5, right? Mm-hmm. We do the 5 you digs, right? Well, a 5A, 4B, 3C, 2D, and 1F, right? So, right. And then you have minuses and pluses, so it all works out for me. For me personally, after watching this film and having it, I watched it Tuesday night, so it's been, a night and a day and another night and a day that I've kind of 2 days where I've kind of let it dwell on me. Mm-hmm. It's a movie that's been sticking with me.
Yeah.
And I like films like that. Street trash is not going to stick with you.
The smell might stay on you.
Yeah, right. It might stick on you, but it's not going to stick with you. This movie sticks with me. I love the myriad of thematic ideas being pursued in this film. I think it's very well put together. If this was PCP or DHS, I would give it a 4.5, which to me here translates into an A.
Yes, I am right there with you. Same thing. If we were doing out of 5, I would give it a 4.5. And today I'm going to give it an A. The only other movie that I've done so far was last week. We did Drag Me to Hell from Sam Raimi. I gave that an A minus. I think they're neck and neck for very different reasons, but I think Possessor a little bit cleaner of a film, a little bit, not a little bit, a lot more of an intelligent film, more subtext. So I'm gonna go with an A too, man. I'm really, really glad that you enjoyed the film, man. Thanks for doing this with me, brother. Hell yeah.
Well, thank you for having me, and thank you for picking this movie, man. And I'm glad now. Now I want to see Infinity Pool. And what's the other movie that he did?
Antiviral is, again, it came out in 2012. It's on Tubi. I threw it on. I'm gonna watch that this week. I was gonna watch it before this one. I'm like, don't want to overdo it, man. Just fucking take it easy, bro. So I didn't. I saved it. I'm probably gonna watch it sometime this week while it's still on Tubi. But what do you got coming up, man? As you said, you just did Ex Machina, badass sci-fi. I'll call it a sci-fi horror film on PC movie night on Monday. Would you call it thrillerish, horrorish?
It's definitely more sci-fi than horror, and like this one's a sci-fi horror as well.
Right.
This one's more like, I think, blended well together, kind of more like a Videodrome.
That was one thing I was going to ask you. I said in the rundown, you definitely consider this a horror film.
Oh, 100%. I'm sorry.
No, what about it makes it a horror film? Because I just watched another movie hobo with a shotgun, and there's extreme violence in that movie. I don't know if it's a horror movie though, but I would almost consider it a horror movie. But a Tarantino movie does that with the violence, but it's not a horror movie. So what is the difference?
Well, what is the violence we're trying to do here? I mean, just like in a Tarantino film, the violence is trying to shock us. And in certain horror films, the violence is trying to make us have fun. In certain Tarantino films, the violence is there to make us have fun. Which makes this a horror movie to me is its themes, really.
Right.
Like it's getting into like the mind and the body. And you know, we all like to talk about body horror, but it's body mind horror, right? And it's definitely leans heavier into the sci-fi aspects. But like, bruh, this is about possession. Take out the idea of another person through a means of technology doing this and just make it a demon. What's the difference?
Right.
You know what I'm saying? The same themes, the same level of gore, the same level of cerebral context is still there. But what makes it a truly horror film to me is that it's dwelling and talking about the horror of the human experience. On a very individual basis and how we're influenced by others. So some people could be hardline in the sand. This is just a sci-fi film with a dark edge to it. But to me, it's a horror film. But at the same time, I don't believe in words like psychological thriller. So, you know, there you go.
I don't know. I don't know. I had a really good explanation I heard on a podcast. If I could think of what it was. Evolution of Horror podcast. It's actually, I think it was Kim Newman that said it on there. So this is coming straight from someone that knows what the fuck they're talking about. And he used a great example of between Silence of the Lambs and is it Mindhunter or Manhunter? Manhunter. Where imagine in Silence of the Lambs, Hannibal Lecter's cell, and now imagine it in Manhunter. Manhunter considered a psychological thriller, procedural crime movie, and you look at Hannibal Lecter's cell and it's just white, padded, clinical looking, and then in Silence of the Lambs it's a dungeon. You know what I mean? It's just like dark and like much more moody and atmospheric. And I guess to add into for Possessor, the score adds a lot to making it a horror movie too, with the atmospheric score that it has. But what do you think of that comparison between Silence of the Lambs and Manhunter? That makes sense to you? That jive with you?
It does make sense. Manhunter is less horror, I think, than Silence of the Lambs. Though I do think Manhunter is a superior film. That's just me. But the greatest psychological thriller of the 90s is Exorcist 3. We all know.
Oh, fucking hell. Hey, we've mentioned Burial Ground and Exorcist 3. I think we could call it a fucking
we did all the fucking checks, man. Everybody. But a lot of it is in dealing with the imagery, the way it brings it across. If this was just solely sci-fi, it would maintain this very cold space, and it wouldn't get so into the psychological. It wouldn't get so into the truly horrifying elements of losing yourself, you know, and not understanding. And I don't know what it's like to feel like I'm not in the right body. I don't know what it's like to feel like I belong in someone else's body. I don't know what it's really like to not feel like me. Well, sometimes we do. You know what I'm saying? But this one deals with fears.
Right.
And that to me is the biggest difference. Now, sci-fi movies can deal with fears and not be necessarily horror. They can have horrific elements. I would say that this is sci-fi more so than horror. But I would classify this as a sci-fi horror, just like I would Alien or something like that.
And just to be clear, like what I plan to do on this show, if it even fucking sniffs horror, I'll cover it. I'll cover Hobo with a Shotgun. I'll fuck around and cover Batman Returns. He's a bat. You know what I mean? You know what I mean?
But Penguin's a true monster. That's a movie about monsters.
Right. No, I'm probably
and all that shit.
I'm probably half joking about Batman Returns, but I will cover. My plan is to cover anything that kind of like you could squint and it feels like a horror movie. Then I want to talk about it.
Fuck, on DHS we did Dead Zone and fucking Legend, so I think we're solid. I think we're solid here.
Right. All right. So what do you got coming up? As I said, you did Ex Machina last week. What do you got coming up next week? And you got the weekly reviews coming out Wednesdays or Tuesday nights. What do you got going on, brother?
Yeah, every Tuesday night we do the weekly comic book review, which is the best comic book review on YouTube.
Goddamn right.
Go and vote for me right now at the cbcawards.org. You can nominate me right now for best comic review, best comic channel, lifetime achievement award, but above all else, best collaboration for the Best of the Comics of the Month stream that we do. But I really want y'all to nominate me for best hair. Like really, like just nominate me for best hair. I don't need to win it. I mean, Very Gary's out there. He's got a lot of hair. There are people with these giant beards because beard, hair, it's all wrapped up. But y'all, I've taken the hat off fully this year. Y'all know what's going on up here. It's beautiful. I need that. But Sunday night, Rockin Robbie Live returns. So that's cool. We had 2 weeks off. I saw Weezer this last Sunday night.
Saw Jack White too.
Jack White was watching Weezer with my new friend Jack White. He smelled amazing, by the way, just so you know. I wish I would have asked him what he was wearing. But Rockin Robbie Live on Sunday night. Monday night, we're still in Crew's choice. We're in Hammer Time Whole Shoes pick. He picked apparently a very sad, sappy anime fucking film called A Silent Voice. I haven't watched it yet, but I'm excited for that. And I may, if I can, pop into Street Trash on Dylan's horror show on Saturday night.
Hell yeah, brother. Sounds like a shitload of fun. All right, before we dip out again, say thank you to the chat. Two Gun, I always appreciate your support. Bobby Scarpat was in here. Brother Joe was up in this bitch. Fable, Steph, I think I said Scarpad, GT Comics, my man in the house, Rogue Collecting, Jay, Davey. All you guys are awesome, man. No, really, dude. Like it's very much appreciative for you guys to pop in. So I thank you very much for spending some time on Thursday night with us here on Blood Splatter Chatter. Robbie, I appreciate the piss out of you, and you know it, my friend. Everybody out there, we'll see you next time.
Good shot.
Okay, he's dead. Let's go get him. That's another one for the fire.
Goodbye, my angel. I hope you have a good time. But of course you will.